Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 86 of Jen and Millie, where where two people get together. Okay, wait a minute. I know it. Just give me a second. Episode 86 of Jen and Millie, where a Gen Xer and a millennial share the strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess.
Wow, there you go.
Did
Perfect.
I get it?
You got it the second time.
Did I really?
After stumbling, yeah.
Yeah, I can memorize if I.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a theater person. I used to
know,
have to
yeah, it's just
memorize
like
lines all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah. But I had to get in it because I got this is great learning. I got too far in my head and I was out of my heart. And I paused for a second and got in my heart and just closed my eyes and went, got it.
There you go. You got it. You got it. That's awesome. Awesome. Well,
How are you,
episode
Tess?
86. I'm doing well. There's a lot happening in my life. I made the comment, and then I qualified it with everyone has a lot going on, when I was talking with someone earlier today, and they were like, but you have a few more things than most people happening in your life, and so acknowledge that, you're moving your entire life, and so it's a lot more than most people have when there's a run of the mill. Oh, I have things to do today.
You are slightly inundated with a lot of think abouts.
Decisions.
I know that you are looking at me when I'm doing this, but I'm trying to find the volume on my headphones. And I can't find it.
I'm trying to figure out, groping your headset.
Hold on. Okay, there it is.
Okay. Better?
Yes, I'm better. I wish people could see us sometimes. And if you come to conference, you can.
You can.
Because we'll be doing a Jen and Millie live with an in-person studio audience. But I was searching for where my volume is on these really awesome headphones that not only are sound canceling and beautiful and great and they are very clear, I can move all around with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I can set up my Spotify and dance all over if I want to. But I can't. My record player is old enough to not be able to hook up digitally.
Sure.
But if I could, I would. Yeah. That was actually a prescription ordered by my friend Jeremy that I plug into my record player and and listen. So yes, you do have a lot going on. We're going to talk about a few things today that affect the overall state of the American workplace. But I also think that we should talk about the state of Tess and the state of Allison.
Okay.
If you had to give, your 3 or 4 sentence explanation. I also have some really, not for this time, but for next, some really, really great questions about how you describe yourself. I was asked to describe myself recently. I describe myself as a recovering caretaker who is just learning how to take care of herself.
Oh, dang, that's good. Ooh.
Accurate.
Oof, very accurate and very well said. #communication. So I'm doing this workshop, which I need to just tell you about, more so offline, and maybe we'll talk about it on a future Jen and Millie, but it's called Finding Freedom, White Women Acknowledging Their Own White Supremacy. And so it's an incredible workshop, and I just started it this week. It's 5 weeks. We have prep work, we have reflection work, we have small groups, and we have high five buddy partners, one-on-one buddy partners. And so there's all of this stuff with this virtual workshop that you have to do ahead of time. You were assigned a partner given your background. Your small reflection groups are based on your geopolitical location. All of this incredible content. It's specifically designed, I think there's one person that identifies as biracial, but everyone else is white. It's specifically designed for white people to acknowledge white supremacy and deal with their own white supremacy. And so just this absolutely incredible workshop so far, and I already have so many things that I want to share with you about facilitating and that you could think about incorporating into new mentor training and stuff, knowing that you're still going to do a lot of that virtually. And also it's an incredible workshop and you should just attend. But one of the things that we did, speaking of describing ourselves, is every session we have to rename ourselves based on something that something specific based on a prompt. And so this time we had to rename ourselves and put the name of our favorite river in the prompt, talking about life flowing like a river and beginnings and ends, and knowing that this is the beginning. And it was just like this whole metaphor. And then when we broke into small groups, eventually we kind of like helped identify or like shout out each other's like rivers and things like that. But it was interesting. So every session there's something specific that we have to like rename ourselves as, and it was just one of the neat things. But anyway, so speaking of description, and then another thing that I wanted to share is we are recording this episode on June 17th of 2021, and so 2 days from now is Juneteenth. And what I love about, we did an episode a while back about kind of in the wake of protests, in the wake of George Floyd, a really great conversation about racism and acknowledging systemic racism. And so I just want to take a moment to pause in this space here to say happy Juneteenth. Juneteenth, not many people know or acknowledge. For people who have been systemically oppressed in the United States, specifically people who are Black identifying and African American, Juneteenth is the true Independence Day. It is the date that, despite 2 years prior, the Emancipation Proclamation was declared and signed in executive order by President Abraham Lincoln. It took 2 years for that message, over 2 years, because that was in January. And so, June 19th is the date that military forces eventually came to the very last known areas, and they happened to be in the state of Texas, where slaves were being held, even though it had been made illegal to hold slaves 2 years prior to that. And so basically it's this concept that none of us are free until all of us are free. And it's just such a beautiful concept of solidarity and acknowledging the shared experience, right, of many individuals who have ancestry and heritage, not only in slavery, acknowledging the reality of it as a nation, but also part of it is this call to recognize that, what I've really come to find about it, and what I appreciate, is that it's the reality that it was over 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was declared and signed that the last slave was finally freed. It's a reminder that while we might have things written on paper about equality and justice, about inclusion and belonging, unless we infuse that into our culture and our practices in everyday life, it doesn't mean anything. Right? It can be on paper, but it's not actually going to change people's lives if we don't practice that, if we don't live by that, if we don't implement what we say we do. Like, for me, that's integrity. And so what I love about it becoming just a couple days ago, it was just on Tuesday, the Senate passed a bill to make it a federal holiday. Yesterday, the House also passed the bill. And I just received a notification 5 minutes ago that President Biden signed the bill into law, acknowledging the official end of slavery, what many call the true Independence Day, not July 4th, but Juneteenth, the true Independence Day, because that is when independence and liberty was given to all people. It is now a federal holiday. So yay,
beautiful.
Which is huge, right? But I'm also
yes.
like, okay, this is great, and let's celebrate and acknowledge it, but we can't just like be like, okay, we're finally acknowledging our white supremacy and racism as a culture. Now that people are going to probably have it off in coming years, it's going to be this marked day in our regular annual cyclical lives. It also needs to be a reminder that there's a long list of things that need to still be corrected and changed to achieve true equity, and to really ensure that we enact reparations and enact healing and enact these things that are needed for people who even today still feel the effects of racism because of the racial wealth gap, because of the opportunity gap, because of the access gap, things like that. And so anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox, but we had
I love that. And
we had an episode about racism and about the protests, so I wanted to acknowledge.
And it's Pride Month. It's Pride Month, and I think that we have done a remarkable job. Big kudos to our marketing team to acknowledge that really well in social media for teammates. I got to attend a Pride event up in Avon over the weekend, and was just absolutely thrilled to see a community embrace its youth. Got to march in the parade and really witness a lot of young people feeling a sense of belonging and feeling loved and supported. Also reminded of a great group that I learned about through my friend Danielle from Gretna, called Free Mom Hugs. And I am looking closer at getting certified in that. I'm very excited about it. It's essentially moms that want to support kids where they are, as they are, how they are, in particular when they don't have that kind of support at home. And then I learned about an organization called Serendipity, where they stand in at weddings when a parent may choose not to be present. Oh, and I am excited about this. So I have been kind of soul longing for what is something I want to get involved in here, and kind of letting the universe tell me. And so I think a great celebration for me as part of Pride Month was the recognition of what I can do and how I can use some of those natural parts of me to give back. I think being a mom empowers us to do that well if we choose to. And my kids have lots of bonus parents, so I would be honored to be one too. So I'm excited about it.
So awesome.
So yay.
So yay.
Yay for good celebrations.
Yay for good celebrations. Yeah. Celebration corner. Awesome. Cheer corner. I'm trying to think of an alliterational way to call
Wow, that seems a little bit rah. Cheer corner.
It's like so not me.
Yeah, it's not.
No. I was like trying to figure out something that would be like catchy, which is also not me. So let's just say good celebrations. Good celebrations. Okay. One of the things, though, that I know we wanted to talk about today was the fact that just today, or maybe it was last night, depending on what time zone you were in, Gallup released the 2021 State of the Global Workplace Report. It is a beautiful 191-page document outlining all of the research they did in 2020 to understand the workplace culture. They've done state of the workplace, state of the American workplace. I think they have done some state of the global workplaces prior to this, but primarily they do very frequently state of the American workplace, which is what we quote a whole lot. Basically with the idea of discovering how employees around the world experienced life and work in 2020. So some of the things they concentrated on were the effects of COVID-19, employee engagement and life evaluation, daily negative emotions, and environmental social governance. And so I wanted to give a few highlights. Because this was just released and I found out about it this morning, which I think is when it was released. I haven't had the most time to dig into it quite yet. So there'll probably be more nuggets that I will drop in further episodes. But already from the executive summary and the preliminary, data in the report that I've reviewed, it's pretty fascinating, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about. We know that disengagement is high in general in workplaces, but it did increase, not surprisingly, in the midst of the pandemic. 7 in 10 employees are struggling rather than thriving in their own life, and 80% are not engaged or actively disengaged in their work. Lack of engagement.
Okay, hold up. So this changes the 1/3 statistic that we have always used, which has been pretty constant. 1/3 of Americans are disengaged at work has been a pretty constant.
Though that's a clarifying point, right? This is a global study. And
this is globally,
okay. Right? So we're talking a little bit of a different perspective, right? So globally, disengagement numbers have been always slightly different than American numbers, and so it's not necessarily the 2/3, 1/3 like we normally see. It is 80-20 split. So, which from their data is they said is a 2% increase from the last time they did global. So it's not as drastic of an increase.
80%. Disengaged?
Disengaged or actively disengaged. So only 20% of the global workplace is engaged at work. Yeah. Which is much worse than the American workplace, which is where still only 1/3 of Americans are engaged at work, but which I didn't scroll down to the American specific part, so I don't know if American disengagement, how that has shifted in light of the pandemic, but in light of 2020. But yes, that's significant. And then one of the things they really dug into in this report is the concept of thriving, and that's intersection with engagement. And historically, a lot of their research on engagement and workplace culture we talk about well-being, right? But well-being was kind of its own separate entity that would maybe intersect with workplace culture and workplace engagement, life engagement, right? But this report basically, if I'm jumping ahead in my notes, makes the claim that what is vital to workplaces is actually both employee engagement as well as whole person thriving, or well-being thriving, I think is what I was trying to find that page. Well-being thriving is what they say. Like, it is imperative to workplaces that they evaluate both of those among their employees, because work is so much a part of our lives, and the best kinds of organizations, the best workplaces are the ones that care about the whole person. One of the things that was particularly poignant that I sent to somebody earlier today was a quote from the report that said, no well-being program, right? Because it talked a lot about, like, companies will do like a healthy eating contest and track your steps and things like that. No well-being program will be effective until employees can trust their leaders and managers to care about them as people. So basically, they talked about, and I know we've talked about, all of the different points of well-being, right? That we know it's more than just your career well-being is the word that Gallup uses, but your social well-being, your financial well-being, your physical well-being, and your community well-being. And what they said is that, basically workplaces focus on career well-being, and then they have like some catchy, fun physical well-being things that they do, right? But they don't always focus on their community well-being, the social well-being, nor necessarily the financial well-being. And what they said is some of the greatest organizations, some of the greatest workplace cultures that came up in this study were ones where they had social, financial, and community well-being as a high priority. They also talked in this section of the report about how a lot of that has to do with your generational perspective. We know that the workplace is shifting, right? But millennials and Gen Zers now that are entering the workplace are very concerned about the ecological and environmental footprint of their company, right? So it matters, and they're evaluating those things. They're evaluating things like companies that have unlimited vacation, right? Because they care about balance and they want their employees to thrive. You know, millennials and Gen Zers, well, now millennials are pretty much all in the workplace. They are basically on the workforce. So Gen Zers that are coming in are emphasizing these themes even more that millennials first started fighting for and shifting the workplace around. And so I appreciated that. And so so basically they said the new measure of organizational success is employee engagement plus thriving well-being. That it truly is both. And you need both in order to be a successful organization, because if you're focused on engagement, right, if you're focused on that element, which we know engagement has a lot of impacts in other spaces, right, but if you're not focused on all of these other areas of well-being, right, if you have high engagement, you're probably likely to maybe have good social well-being, but have you thought about community well-being, right? An employee might be really engaged, might have their social, financial, career, and physical well-being taken care of, but they're also concerned about how this company, the organization that they work for, has an effect on the community around it, right? Whether it's partnering and giving paid mentoring leave for their employees, or if it's partnering with a community garden, whether or not it's donating a certain percent of profits back to nonprofits or back to organizations that are working to better the world, so on and so forth, right? Whether or not if they're producing something that, what are they doing with the waste from production, water waste, energy waste, right? Like even sorts of things like that, not just how they give their time and energy, right? But like how they're being responsible stewards of what they produce and the byproducts of what they produce. So, absolutely fascinating. So
I want to pause for a second and talk a little bit about what the definition of thriving, because I think our listeners will probably be hearing that word, and some of them may think, what does that even mean? Or is that really relative to the person? How is that quantitative? How do they measure it? And for me, I know how I would describe thriving. To me, thriving is all 5 of those pieces of well-being in alignment.
Yep.
That's thriving. So, and one tiny little shift off affects all the others. I distinctly, and always when I think about the 5 areas of well-being, I think of my Aunt Meg telling me when my Uncle Mark was very, very sick, and he's a very busy farmer, active guy, and he got very, very sick. And I remember my Aunt Meg in the hospital saying to me, when you don't have your health, you have nothing. And I think about that in relationship to where we are right now.
Yep.
Like, I think there's going to be a lot that comes out of COVID, post-pandemic well-being in regards to health and wellness. Some people went one direction, other people went the other, but we also lost out on preventative care because you couldn't get into your doctor and people didn't go to the dentist. And I think there are going to be some long-term effects on the physical well-being aspect that will throw off thriving that we don't even have a handle on yet to know.
But, then also
but the other areas too.
And further, one of the things that they talk about is if, knowing that 80% of employees are disengaged or actively disengaged globally, it says here, I'll read this, and if you happen to have downloaded the report, it's on page 15 of the report. It says if 80% of an organization's employees are not engaged at work, the organization's resilience during a crisis will be at high risk. Leaders won't be able to consistently achieve their goals, and there's no way for a leader to be effective when their people aren't even paying attention. And so even that long-term effect,
crisis,
right? Like the resiliency crisis is the great revealer. Yes.
Yep. I don't think we can say that enough. And somehow us saying it as often as we have has stuck because it comes up a lot.
Yep.
Comes up a lot in our staff conversations, comes up in a lot of other dialogues. But you go back to those 5 areas and your social and your career. There, many humans globally realized they were out of alignment. Like they started we were forced into a pause point. I don't know if you read my music notes last week. I was talking about forced pause. We were forced into a pause point that we had to stop many of the things that we were busily doing that have forced us to have really serious mirror looks and look around our space and look around our circles and look around our workplace and say, is this what I want? If I'm going to be stuck at home for a year, is this where I'm going? Is this where I want? I think you and I in the coaching that we do have seen significant changes in the ways that people show up as to why they want to work with a coach, why they want to have a change in their life. It's because they were forced into a pause that made them look around and question what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think 80% surprises me, but the reason it surprises me is that I'm not one of those. Like, I love my work. Now, I can get stuck in a lot of things, but the work that I do has meaning and purpose. And I've had lots of conversations with people who are like, what's the point of this? What's my purpose? What's my why? What's my legacy? I love that conversation. What's my legacy? And leaders should be listening to what their employees have to say. I mean, you and I talked about in the green room some of these articles that are coming out, including the one that came from the Morgan Stanley CEO. I don't know how I would feel about that if I was one of those humans. Would I feel like I'm cared about? Or would I feel part of mass production? Wow. And where you are, when we think about all the things that are happening with you, I think, if you listen back, which I know you don't, but if you listen back, you see this with both of us. You see this shift of maybe not thriving, like unease, like I'm anxious. To, I think you're starting to hear some thriving. Yeah. Because we're settling into the decisions that we made during a very odd time to make decisions.
Revealing time?
Yes. A revealing time, but an odd time to make big decisions.
I mean, my big decision was made 2.5 years ago. And so I'm like, it was made before, but it was actualized during this time, right?
Yes.
Where
I,
and
I
what
could say that my,
yeah. Where
right,
and what
my
exactly
heart
that
would,
looked like. Mm-hmm.
yes, my heart was in Colorado since I've been like
Yeah.
8 years
Yeah.
old, but
Yeah.
for it to actualize
Mm-hmm.
during a really odd time.
Yep.
And then I think the other thing too, Tess, when I would love, and I'm sure they won't, but I would love for Gallup to talk about this at some point, is where does gratitude factor into whether a person feels like they're thriving?
That's good. That's good. Cool.
When we are truly grateful and have a gratitude practice,
Yeah.
I would think that that would propel us into a state of thriving.
Thriving that
It
much
is
more.
for me
Absolutely.
anyway.
For sure. For sure.
Even the hard things that got me here are a huge part of my gratitude. If they would not have, those difficult things would not have happened, I wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah.
And that factors into a lot of how I perceive thriving.
Yeah. That's good. Good. Yeah. I think that's great. And it really, Gallup does define it very similarly based on their elements of well-being. One of the specific things that they do, which I know we've talked about this concept, but I don't think we've talked about the quantitative scale of this, which is why I was like, ooh, this would be good to talk more about. So one of the ways that they define thriving is by the best possible life scale. And we have talked about and asked listeners to share with us what a best possible life looks like and what are maybe some life limiting things that are, preventing you from getting there, right? What are your limitations and what are the narratives you're speaking into your life that are preventing you from getting to the best possible life? What I really like about this is it makes you evaluate currently where you're at, and then actually what it does is it future casts and potentially builds hope, because it asks you to think about your future. One of the things that, before I really get into that, one of the things that I really loved in their executive summary of this, before it gets into the details, they said, Gallup says on page 7 of their report, despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, it seemed hope never died. Wow, what an echo to Dr. Shane Lopez. Although there is a wide range of percentages of thriving employees across regions, as the best possible life data shows, even amidst their struggles, most could see that their future was brighter than their present. For much of the world, hope for the future stayed about the same compared to 2019, which is crazy because almost everything, all of the negative things pretty much increased, all of the positive things pretty much dropped. But to know that hope stayed consistent throughout a global pandemic was incredible. And so one of the ways, like I said, that they evaluate the
coming up on 5 years.
Coming up on 5 years. Mm-hmm.
July will be 5. Yep.
5
and I
years.
just think, and yet legacy.
Mm-hmm.
The legacy that he has left with those of us who believe in, study, know, hope, makes a difference is just incredible. That future casting, all that language. It's his language.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally is. It totally is. So this, the idea of the best possible life scale is one of the ways that Gallup operationalizes the concept of thriving. What they find is that thriving employees report significantly fewer health problems, less worry, less stress, less sadness, less depression and anger, and more hope, energy, happiness, interest, and respect. What they found, though, in this global global research initiative is that only 32% of employees are at a level of thriving, which is very sad. They use the word abysmal a whole lot, a whole lot in the report, and to describe basically the stats, the disengagement, the lack of thriving in the world globally. Okay, so the best possible life scale is a 2-part question, and it assesses how people feel about their lives currently and what to expect in their lives in 5 years. So how we go about doing this is that you imagine a ladder with steps numbered 0 to 10, with 0 on the bottom and 10 on top. Suppose that the top of the ladder represents your best possible life, and the bottom represents your worst possible life. Again, 0 to 10 is the scale. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? I know what yours.
Are you asking?
I know,
Are you asking me?
I was walking us through it, but I also think we should pause and reflect on that. And then we have to say why. Gallup doesn't ask that because primarily quantitative researchers, so they ask this on a 0 to 10.
Who's going first?
You.
Of course. It's a good day. I mean, you could have caught me maybe on a different... I'm going to say 8.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. I am getting so solid in my footing. I'm crafting a life that I've wanted. I'm choosing for myself. I'm like almost like a lab coat experiment in what is important for my well-being, who is important in what do I want to surround myself with. But so every morning I do meditation, and I close meditation every morning with this quote from Golda Meir, which is, trust yourself. Create the kind of self that you would be happy to live with all your life. Make the most of yourself by fanning the tiny inner sparks of possibility into flames of achievement. And we're halfway point in the year. It's funny that this comes up today because I've been thinking about, I have not written on my personal blog in a while. And I wanted to write about, I'm at the halfway point of my year of the muse. Like, what have I gotten done? Where do I feel like I've accomplished? Have I honored that? And holy crap, have I gotten a lot of things done. Like, just reflecting of the things that I've tried and accomplished already, it was really mind-blowing. And I don't know that I've ever felt that accomplished, but maybe it was because I wasn't doing it just for me. My accomplishments were so centered in someone else's achievement or someone else's needs that these accomplishments have been solely mine. Like, to take a trail running class and be able to run 6 miles up and down a canyon is a big deal to me. Yeah. And being able to do that, to have already gone to 2 Red Rock shows, to have established myself in so many different ways on my own. The things that I've done organizationally for my job, a lot has happened in 6 months' time. I've been in Colorado now 9 months. In 6 months of this 2021 year, I feel like I've accomplished more than I have in many years past. And maybe it feels that way because it's my choices and me really discovering what that Golda Meir quote means. Creating the kind of self that you'd be happy to live with. It's becoming part of me. I'm really leaning into trusting myself and saying, I'm still figuring stuff out, and I don't have to there's no end date. There's no, so bizarre that I think I wrote this today, keep going and allow things to unfold, but you know what works and what doesn't. Explore and experience. You're nowhere ready for anything, but yet you know that the right things come along when they're supposed to. It's just, I'm forever in practice, but I'm so thriving in practice. So I would say an 8. Catch me tomorrow and I might lower it.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm surprised at how high that is. That's awesome. That's so great.
Feels pretty good. Yeah.
Good. I would say I am probably at a 6.5.
Dismal.
Dismal. I know that it will look a little differently in the fall. I just think I'm just stressed. Like, there's a lot to get done, and I am grateful that I have people and things that are pulling me back to the present that help me celebrate in this. I think I'm just, there's a lot to get done, mostly work-wise, before I leave. There's a lot that I've been tasked with that doesn't feel possible to me before my departure, and I think that's hard. because I want to leave well and I want to get done all I'm being asked to get done, but it just does not feel possible, and that just stresses me out. And yeah, so I think summer is always a hard time for me because there's always a ton of work to do trying to turn around data from the school year, but it just is that much more with an entire database migration and things like that I've been asked to do.
I want to ask a hard question, okay?
Okay.
If you took that component out, the workload, the current workload, seasonal workload, but also end of your teammates' time workload, and the legacy that you want to leave and your integrity, knowing that if you were to take that piece out, what would your level be?
I mean, right, rationally, of course, it's going to be higher because that's, I don't know that I feel the load physiologically, and so I don't know that I can truly answer that. I don't know that I can put a number to it because I can't not feel the weight of it. And so I can think back to times where I haven't felt the weight of workload, but that is like ancient history. It feels like in my mind. And so I think for me, though, it is very much tied up into, like you mentioned, the words that you mentioned, identity, integrity, legacy. Somebody today that I have not known very long that is now a Teammates employee was like, you're giving your baby of 5 years away, like 5 years full-time, 7 years, and that is really hard. And so I think there's grief in that, and that is part of the physiological things that are happening to me that I just, I woke up with my neck completely locked the other day, and so I had to go to the doctor and things like that I know that it's because of carrying a lot of this, which is hard, which means that I don't have physical well-being or career well-being, and so those sort of things are lower than they really are, so I know that they would be higher if I had the ability.
I also want to I want to pause you a second, and I want to challenge you, as I have been trying to do for myself as well. If you were coaching you,
I'm about to.
What would you say?
This podcast because I'm getting so mad at you. Just drop you.
Okay, I know you hate that question, but
I know.
But what I really think is important here is, and I've been saying this a lot, and it's as much as my own mantra. And part of the reason I think I'm an 8 right now is my identity is not my job. I am Allison Horn. My identity, my well-being, my persona, my existence, my legacy is not my job. And you and I would both coach and teach to that. Yet I think we both have carried identity in our jobs. And I'm gonna use this in context of me, so that I am hoping that you will not be mad at me for asking you to think about that. I made my identity be my kid's mom, okay? For 20 some years, that was my existence. Thankfully, their dad and I got divorced, or those 2 children would have been the most helicoptered human beings on this earth, and they would be disasters right now. So we look at that with gratitude, and the kids will say that too. They're like, thankfully, Mom had to not parent us 24/7, and I had to learn that I was doing too much, and my existence was so much about them. Not that that's a bad thing, but it is when it's out of balance. It is when you don't even know who you are. And that's what happened after their dad and I got divorced. I didn't know who I was. Then I put my identity in being somebody else's wife. And I've put my identity for 15 plus years in my job. I mean, I am just starting to figure out what I would teach and preach, which is your being, your thriving is you as a person, and your job is your identity. I talk to so many people who are just so wound up tight about work, and I'm like, but you're not your job. You're you as a human. And when I get really sticky about it, I use their confirmation names because I know what those are. So I've done that a couple times this week. One of my friends, I'm like, you are and not the title that you carry at your job. That can get toxic, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I think I'm also witnessing this kind of from afar because I'm in this rare unicorn season of freedom where I don't have, I mean, I just killed a plant. That's how that's going. That's how responsibility is going for me. The one plant that I wanted to see succeed is now dead. And
That's great.
yes, so I'm in this space of like total freedom. And I know that's, it's not fair for me to say this, but what I am saying is when I started to craft and think about the life that I want, I had to remove these labels on myself that were not necessarily Allison Horn. They were mom, trainer, sister, auntie. All just like on the last session or last dialogue. That's how I describe myself. I wanted the labels and titles.
Yeah.
And you described yourself as the human.
My, how the turns have tabled. My, how the turntables. There we go. That's the right quote. My, how the turntables. Quote Michael Scott. Yes. No, I totally agree. I know that, right? I know that. But it's hard, right? And it's, for me, it's less about
It's integrity.
Yeah, that's it. That's
It's
what
integrity.
it is. It's not, because it's not about, like, I define myself not as, you know, the teammates research coordinator, right? That's, like, definitely not one of the, like, it's so much of my life. But, like, for me, it's about, it's about it's actually about who I am, not labels, and ensuring that that's the person that everyone gets. And it's hard because that person is intense and is 110% all the time and does not rest. And that kind of sucks, but that's my propensity as a full-blown 8 to like give everything all the time. And it means that there's not a lot of downtime and I don't rest well and I don't say no very well and all these things that I know about myself, right? But yeah, so to me, that what I'm struggling with and why I have maybe a lower best possible life score than I think, lower than you for sure in a relative sense, but also lower than, like, you know, I would think, knowing I'm about to step into a dream actualized, a dream come true in my life, right? It's because my integrity can't have senioritis knowing that I'm leaving. Like, I can't just, like,
I think
step back and let things unfold
Right.
as they're unfolding because I know all that needs to get done.
and because you have a high level of integrity.
Yeah. And that's it.
So when
And
you
it
say I
sucks.
can't,
It sucks all the
yeah,
time.
but it's you. It's authentic you, and you can't be anybody other than who you are. So I think what would be good, Tess, is we can make a note here, and I'm saying this out loud so that it goes into your context brain, but maybe we should do a check-in going,
Yeah.
using the scale and the numbers each and every time we get together on the podcast.
Okay. I like it.
You know, where are you today?
Where are you today? What does your best possible life look like? Okay. There's a second part, though, to the scale, which is just your best guess on which step do you think you will stand in the future, say 5 years from now.
So as I've mentioned, I can't do this. I can't do the decision to move away from everything that I've known has been so significant that I cannot think ahead. And at first I was really beating myself up for it. I was thinking there's something wrong with me that I can't future cast right now. But I realized the heaviness of the decision to move here and to change my life so significantly is enough. That's enough. And I don't have to get ahead of myself. So I would hope that, you know, of course we would hope. But 5 years from now, I'm going to be 51. And I don't know. I think I said this on the last episode, but if I didn't, I want to make sure I say it again. My running coach, she's so good. She would say, her name's Christy, she would say things like, you know why we run? It's because we can. And we're going to do it right now because we can. And yes, you might get tired. And yes, you're going straight uphill and it might get hard. And so when it gets so hard that you can't do it anymore, you power hike, okay? But if you can run, you run. And that has settled into my brain in so many ways. I'm doing this because I can. I don't know what at 51 I will be capable of doing, maybe more. I'm hoping so. I'm hoping I'm like doing triathlons and paddleboarding across rivers and doing all kinds of zany things. But I can't, it is almost paralysis for me to future cast. I also think that I got burned on that. I got so burned on future casting that now my boundaries and my soul and my heart are like, absolutely not. We're not going there. That hurt you so bad that, yep, I'm just not gonna. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just allowing things to unfold. Okay. So for you, your rung?
Yes, my rung. Well, 5 years from now, I'll be well into my 30s. I know, eye roll, insert eye roll. Well, I will be 32. And
just nuts. Math is the worst.
The worst.
This is the worst math. Okay.
Yeah, so I will be 32 5 years from now. I will have probably just graduated with my PhD, and I will hopefully have a postdoc fellowship lined up to live internationally and do research internationally for a year or two, and or have been connected with a professorship position, tenure track professor position at a university, somewhere, preferably East Coast.
So what's that rung?
What's
the number?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's so conditional. It's like, it's the same thing. Like, so I have futuristic 33 out of 34, right? So I'm like, I have a really clear picture in my mind of what I want for the future, but it's hard to like live in that and believe in that. And so that rung would be 8.5, 9. Yeah, I would say.
I think not this episode, but I think episodes in the future is what would a 10 look like. And are any of us really willing to say it's a 10?
I don't have high enough positivity to.
Yeah, I don't either, because I'm like,
to even believe that, because I'm like, life could always be better, right? Like, you know.
So I think just knowing, and I'll take this back to Shane. That's how we become hopeful, is by dreaming about that. That's how we become improve our sense of well-being and improve thriving, is by doing the future casting. And when I say that about how I was hurt and burned by it and my brain has stopped, it doesn't mean that I don't believe in it anymore.
Yeah.
It just means that my soul needed a pause point to say, you allowed someone to make you believe that the future would look like this.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing now, and probably the reason I can say 8, is because I'm now starting to own and recognize I will know and determine and choose what those next steps look like. I think that this is like, we should probably need a part 2.
Yeah, probably.
On this.
Yeah.
Because I think we should dive deeper into their results. I would love to look at the state of the American workplace very specifically.
Compare.
I think we need to dive into return to work, post-pandemic pressure.
And then there's this whole part, which is what I really wanted to get. So I love the Best Possible Life stuff and the concept of thriving, and it being a new definition in conjunction with engagement, as in terms of like great organizations, outstanding organizations, successful organizations. That's the word they use. There's this whole section though about daily negative emotions and the increase in very specific types of emotions in the workplace because of the pandemic and what the workplace looked like last year. And so yes, that's like, I think, a whole nother thing that I want to talk about. So yes, because we are well into our time already, that's probably a good place to wrap up. So when we think about action items for this episode, I think that really, download the State of the Global Workplace if you want to dig into some of the data, see what some of their findings are. It's free and available. It's Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2021 report, and I can link it. I'll link it in kind of the show notes that come along with the description of the show, so anyone can sign up and grab that if they want to. You have to sign up, and then you get an email with the PDF that you can download, just as an FYI. So you don't just go to a site to grab it. You have to submit your info, and then they'll send you the report in a PDF. So take a look at that. And then, I love that we've gotten to hear from some people what their best possible life looks like already. And so I'd be curious for those who have already kind of shared some of that with us based on episodes that we've done a while ago on that topic, but also those who maybe haven't shared their best possible life with us. Where would you put yourself on this scale? I would love to know why, but that's always my question that supplements any what, who, when, or how questions that I have, because I lead number one with context. So I'm always going to ask you why, but you don't necessarily need to respond that. But maybe if you don't want to, I'd love to hear it. But really responding to these two questions on a ladder from 0 to 10, where 0 is at the bottom, the worst possible life for you, and 10 at the top is the best possible life for you. Where would you put yourself now? And based on your best guess, where would you put yourself 5 years from now? So that's it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 86 of Jen and Millie. We appreciate the fact that you tuned in with us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend. I don't remember all this off the top of my head. I'm trying to do it off the top of my head. I'm getting into my head. Oh, my gosh. Thank you for tuning in to this episode.
Stop. Pause. Heart.
I still won't because I'm still in my head. I function in my head, though. I can't function in my heart very well.
Hands here. Hands here. Hands here.
Oh my gosh.
Hands here. Now try.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to episode 86 of Jen and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. We'd love to hear the responses to the question that we posed in this episode. The best way to reach us to share your responses is by following us on Instagram. That's at Jen and Millie, at GENNANDMILLIE. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are exclusively that of Allison Horn and Tess Starman and may not reflect the views of Teammates Mentoring Program at large. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time.